had 3 or 4 songs that ended up on that popular chart, and started to have, a few people reaching out. And one of the people that reached out booked for Lighting in a Bottle, this festival in kind of like
Yeah.
north of LA.
Hmm.
And he was like, hey, like, been following you, really like your music.
Yeah, I'm Adam, and this is about you and your journey in music. And we'll talk about how you got to where you are now.
Sounds good. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Nashville now, but I'm originally from San Diego, California.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. Are you in LA?
I'm in San Francisco, it's a little further north.
Okay. I spent about 5 years up in San Francisco.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. I come from the radio world. I was on Live 105 in San Francisco for a while, but then I think they're called like Dave
Cool.
FM or something like that now. It's like totally flip formats.
You've got the radio voice, man, so I believe it.
I appreciate that. Are you originally from San Francisco?
No, so I'm actually originally from Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I've been here for I guess 6 years now, 7 years almost.
Right on.
So yeah.
Born and raised in Vancouver and up until moving to San Francisco?
Kind of. So born and raised in Vancouver. Ended up going to school in Florida. So I was playing soccer quite competitively at the time. And there's an opportunity to play like Div 1 down in Florida. So did that for 4 years, then moved back to Vancouver, ended up in Luxembourg for 3 years, and then from Luxembourg to San Francisco. So bouncing around a little bit, but
yeah. Cool. So what was it like growing up in Vancouver? I mean, you're just north, not a whole, very, very north of the Bay Area.
Yeah, but not that far north of the border. So I say Vancouver. I grew up in like the suburbs of Vancouver, White Rock, which is 10 minutes north of the US border.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's great. Like anyone that's been to Vancouver in the summer knows it's like the best city in the world. There's great skiing in the winter if you're into that too. There's a lot of rain in the shoulder seasons, but if you can get through that, it's a pretty incredible place to live.
Nice. What about music? Do you come from a musical household?
I do, yeah. So my mom is a really good piano player, and she got sort of all of us into piano at a pretty young age. My dad, I don't think he plays any instruments, but has a huge appreciation for music and all sorts of genres. So he definitely helped introduce. I've got 2 brothers, and he definitely helped introduce us to different styles of music and that when we were kids. So yeah, fairly music. They career-wise, my mom was a nurse, my dad was a lawyer, so they went in different directions there. But
yeah.
Yeah.
What about your siblings? Do they play at all or no?
So my younger brother, he sort of picked up piano he took it young and then picked up piano in the last few years, and he's become an incredible piano player, much better than I am, which has kind of been cool to see. Him taking it up somewhat late. My older brother, loves music. I think he was the first to drop out of piano lessons from of the 3 of us, but kind of like my dad, introduces me to new music all the time and has a big appreciation for it.
That's cool. So piano is the first instrument you were kind of put onto, I guess, as a kid?
Yeah, piano was the first one. I hated it. I remember I had to go to piano lessons in elementary school every Wednesday, and I would always like complain to my mom. I was like, I'm not feeling good. I feel sick.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to go. And it happened to line up with like on Wednesdays we had hot lunch day at our school where like they bring in McDonald's, right? And
wow.
my mom's way of handling the problem was like, oh, I guess you're getting sick from the McDonald's, so we'll have to cut that out so you can make piano lessons.
Oh, brilliant.
So I was a kid for the next year that was eating a muffin while all my friends were eating McDonald's, and I was still going to piano lessons. So I thank her for it now, but
so she still didn't let you get the McDonald's?
No, I was on a muffin for the next 2 years.
Oh man.
So
It wasn't like,
I walked
okay,
myself into that one.
yeah, I was gonna say you could have just been like, all right, you know what? I really didn't want to go to piano, but I won't complain about it again if you give me the McDonald's.
Yeah,
I thought
exactly.
that was the route you're going, but no, you got the short end of the stick on both ends. No, you had a
Yeah,
muffin and you're still going to piano lessons.
exactly. Yeah, my mom was a lot smarter than 10-year-old me,
That's hilarious.
but I thank her for it now. So
Yeah. Did you do that for a while? Like, or were you able to convince them to not let you do it, or did you kind of fall in love with it at a certain point?
I think like so taking piano lessons as a kid, it was a very classical focused,
Uh-huh.
and so it didn't really align with like the kind of music that I was interested in at the time. And I think as soon as so I think I took it for probably like 4 years or something like that. And then once you have that foundation, I was like, okay, great. Now I want to branch out and try other instruments. And going into high school, the fascination was drums.
Mhm.
I mean, I wanted turntables and I wanted drums. And, I sort of saved up to eventually get these like Newmark turntables, and then was sort of the band geek in high school, and picked up drums after that.
What did
So
you
yeah, it was
play? You said you're the band geek in high school. What did you play in high school? Drum, percussion?
so I was playing the drums, yeah, and was sort of bouncing between like concert band and jazz band. Was learning bass guitar a little bit because a friend of mine played bass guitar, and I'm left-handed, so it was tough to pick up, string instruments because they're all backwards as a left-handed player.
Right.
So I spent like 2 years learning the guitar upside down just because I didn't have a left-handed guitar. And when I then went to college, like you can't bring your your drum set to your dorm room. So it's like, all right, I guess I got to learn guitar for real if I want to kind of keep playing music. And had this sort of reverse engineer. Like eventually got a left-handed guitar, and then had to figure out how to play the chords the right way.
Right.
So yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so my son is about to turn 7. He's left-handed as well. And we got him a drum set when COVID started. And we got him an electric kit, which is a beautiful thing nowadays. These exist. So we got him lessons, and the drum teacher that he had for a while, who ended up he's I'm in Nashville, and he's like one of those touring guys where he'll like jump on it with a band and tour as just he's actually a bass player most of the time. So we haven't really had him, but he told my son that he should start with the hi-hat on the left side. Do you play
Oh,
the
like
other
right hand.
way? Do you play
I,
with you dominant on your left hand and you hit the snare, or you're over this way?
yeah, I play the way a left-handed player like should technically play, which is everything reversed. But that's not bad advice. I mean, it's a pain in the ass to show up. I mean, that's the terrible thing about being left-handed for a drummer and guitarist is like it's really tough to just go and jam. I mean, you end up learning how to play on a right-handed drum kit, but you're not as good as you would be if you had it fully set up left-handed. But you also don't want to be that guy in the middle of the session that's like unscrewing everything and flipping everything around and then changing it all back. So I don't know what's better. But I mean, if your son can get comfortable in a right-handed set, then like maybe that's the move.
Really? I was just because you're left-handed, I was curious what your position would be on it. I wonder if I
Yeah,
just teach him. I don't know, dude. I'm so like torn about it because I want him to have the best option or best, to pick it up. I mean, he can play fairly well for how young he is and how minimal lessons he has, but it's just like one of those things where it's like, do I just flip it and see what he does? I
yeah. I
don't
mean,
know.
when you're young, you're just a sponge. I mean, you could probably learn both. you know,
Okay.
yeah,
I didn't know if
switch
you're
it
gonna be
up.
like, dude, flip it around, man. Like, but it sounds like you're like, oh, if you could play. It's good to hear you
Yeah,
say that it would be a nightmare to turn it around if you were. But I'm so like, he could stop playing like next year. You know what I mean? He's so young. I was just
yeah.
curious what you thought, but
I mean, at least with drums, like you can do it. It's going to take 10 minutes, but you can do it. With a guitar, it's like you're not going to restring a guitar, right?
right,
So,
yeah,
so there's a little more flexibility on the drum side.
okay, very cool. So, you said you played soccer? And did you went to school in Florida for soccer? So was that kind of the main focus, and music was just kind of a side hobby for you for a while?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's kind of always been. I think growing up in high school, you sort of like, for me, it's like you learn about your career paths, and like trying to be a musician is just not on the list.
Mhm.
It's very much, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or do trades or whatever. And like, oh, if you want to like take a huge risk and probably be poor for the rest of your life, try music, like which is so terrible. But I think that was sort of my mentality growing up.
Mhm.
And and so it's always been um, something I'm super passionate about, but sort of an afterthought.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not until so there's kind of a 10-year gap where I just focused on I guess early on soccer, and then sort of building a career and sort of studying finance, getting a job in finance, and really focusing on that. And I think, at some point in the past 6 years or so, I sort of realized like this isn't giving me much joy. And the thing that I keep thinking about is music. And so it took me a while to kind of shift my focus around like just just following that passion, and trying to pursue that more seriously, and kind
Mhm.
of taking myself seriously in that realm. So yeah, it took a while, but I'm glad I made it
Yeah.
to focus on it now.
When did you start writing songs?
So I think the first song I ever wrote was when I was taking piano lessons as a kid. I don't think I progressed through the levels super quickly in piano, but as soon as I had knowledge of like three or four chords or like a certain melody where I could create something, that's kind of what I focused on. And I think there's two types of musicians. There's the ones that put the 1,000 hours in and really kind of like master their one instrument or two instruments or whatever it is. And then there's people like me that sort of get super excited once they know that base foundation, and focus on like what can I do with this, and what can I create. And so the downside is it sort of stunts your growth into becoming that master of whatever instrument you're pursuing. But um, I got a lot more out of it, which was being able to kind of create with the limited knowledge that I had on an instrument. So
Mhm.
over time, you obviously get better at your instruments, but I never like fully mastered like one instrument and took it to that level 10. It's always been like get base foundation in whatever instrument I'm looking at, and then move to the next and see what I can create with that.
Mhm. Have you always been interested in like the genre that you're doing now and like more of the dance music?
No, well, no, I think that probably came later on in life. I mean, um, yeah, I mean, I definitely have appreciation for all different types of music. When I was living in Vancouver, I was listening to a lot of sort of indie acoustic, like Jack Johnson type stuff, just because it
Mhm.
was it was kind of singer songwriter music at its core. And then moving to Luxembourg, there's a lot of electronic, a lot of like deep house techno, all through Europe. And so I think in Luxembourg, I started to kind of develop that liking for electronic music.
Mhm.
Um, I guess in between that, I was living in Florida, and there was a lot of like Southern hip hop, um, and and it's somewhat reflective of I think the style of music I make now, which kind of has elements of all three of those things. And it's kind of where I mean, it is where the name Vandelux came from. It was like Vancouver, Deland, Florida, and Luxembourg. Those are kind of the three
Okay.
parts, and then
I
the
thought
three
that
different.
I was trying to figure out how to put the Florida part in, but now it makes sense.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
it has to probably be somewhat associated with this. Okay.
Totally, yeah. And it was, kind of three different music influences from those three cities. So yeah, it's kind of been a mixed bag in terms of genre that I've been interested in and focused on.
When did you start? When did like Vandalux start? Was it after you had, like when did you start putting music out as under this kind of project?
Yeah, so I think it was 2016 2016, maybe 2015, 2016, and I was in Luxembourg at the time. And I remember like I hadn't really focused on music at all for like since high school or since college. And I remember downloading an app and being like, wow, it's crazy how far technology's come. Like I can make an entire song on this one 99-cent app. Um, and I think that repiqued my curiosity. And I was also living in this foreign country and didn't really know anyone and had a ton of time after work. And so I was listening to like finding music on Hype Machine at the time. I
Oh
don't know if
yeah.
like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
That makes sense, especially for kind of the genre you fell into. I mean, a lot of people were popping off of that website.
totally, yeah. I mean that like helped kind of springboard um like my career in music was Hype Machine. And I remember listening to a lot of music and hearing these like bootleg kind of illegal remixes. And I was like, well, like you can do that. You can just like take an acapella and remix songs. And so I started playing around with that and scouring the internet for an acapella and then finding ways to rebuild the music around it. And when I first started putting music together, I'd send it to like my brothers and be like, what do you think? And they're like, oh, that's cool. And then I'd be like, all right, I need to get some more ears on this. And so I made it my goal to get a song onto Hype Machine. And the
Hmm.
way Hype Machine works is it's this platform where, in order to get a song on there where people can stream it, it has to be written about by one of the blogs that feed into Hype Machine.
Oh, is
There's
that
no
right?
like,
I didn't realize how
yeah,
that worked. I didn't know if it was like a submit to it and hope that maybe some tastemaker was like, "Oh, this is decent. Let's see if we can throw it somewhere and have someone care."
right. Yeah, so you have to like one of the blogs has to write about you, and I think there's 400 blogs that feed into Hype Machine or something like that.
Okay.
And so I just started spamming, the blogs that I thought were cool that might appreciate the music I was doing. And I think I did like 20 blogs on this first. I had this like biggie like kind of mashup hip hop remix, and one of them wrote back and they're like, "Oh, this is cool. Like we might write about it." And they did, and then within 3 days, it made it to like the number one on the popular charts. Like it kind of blew up on Hype Machine, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is great!"
Oh,
And
wow.
and like Hype Machine stuff, it kind of comes and goes really quickly, but it made me realize like, oh, there's an audience for this, and I should keep doing it.
Mhm.
So Hype Machine definitely helped me get some exposure, like kind of early on, and gave me a bit of confidence to think, maybe I should keep doing this and see what happens.
Like, it's getting a number 1 on Hype Machine for people that are unaware, that was like getting a viral song on TikTok or like getting placed on a Spotify playlist. I mean, that was where a lot of record labels were looking. And if you were a band and you had a number 1 on Hype Machine or you were an artist, then people start reaching out to you. Did you get the same kind of thing with yours? I mean, to go number 1 on their thing, was it like people reaching out like, "Oh, who's this guy doing this?"
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a little bit of that. Like, so I think fast forward a few months later, and I had 3 or 4 songs that ended up on that popular chart and started to have, a few people reaching out. And one of the people that reached out booked for Lighting in a Bottle, this festival in kind of like
Yeah.
north of LA.
Mhm.
And he was like, hey, like, been following you, really like your music. Can you come play at the Pagoda stage at Lightning in a Bottle? And like I didn't know, I'm living in Luxembourg at the time. I'm like haven't gone to any music festivals in the US, so I don't know what this festival is. And I said no, because I also didn't know how to like perform a song live. I wasn't DJing, I was just creating stuff, on Ableton.
Mhm.
And so I said no. And then I was talking to a friend in California like a month later. I was like, oh, these guys from Lightning in a Ball reached out and asked me to play there. And he was like, dude, he's like, what? You said no? Like, you have to do this. You have to do this. And I started looking into it. I was like, oh man, okay, maybe I should, and this would be like a good challenge. And so in about a month, I kind of figured out how to perform at Lightning in a Bottle. Um, and I was like DJing, but I was using Ableton and like an APC 40 to kind of stitch together a set. Um, uh, and so that was kind of my first introduction to like playing in front of people and playing live. So
Wow.
that was one outreach. And kudos to LIB in pushing me into that. And then another one was, I think the third or fourth song I released was a mashup of like this Jurassic 5 song with Temptations, and then I sort of recreated instrumental around it. And I think it hit number one or number two on Hype Machine. And one of the guys from J5 reached out, and he was like, Mark 7, and he's like, hey man, this, like, I like this track. And I was like, I grew up on Jurassic 5. Like they
Same
were,
here.
yeah, like I was just
What
totally.
record did you do? I'm just curious. Was it off
So
What's Golden?
it was What's Golden, like the
Oh
song,
wow.
and it was mixed with Temptations. I can think of the melody, but I can't remember the song name. I'll send it to you after this.
I would love to
It's
hear it. Yeah.
kind of a cool
That
mashup.
beat on What's Gold, like their progression or production was so cool. Like the
Oh,
beats that they
so
put
good.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible. So yeah, Mark 7 reached out, and I was like, I just totally fanboyed out. I was like, man, like, I grew up on you guys, and huge fan. And at the end, I was like, if you ever want to make music together, like, let me know. I'd love to. And didn't get a response for like 3 days, 4 days. But then he wrote back. He's like, yeah, let's do it. And then so
Whoa.
we ended up writing like a full album together, and which was really cool. Like it was funny, kind of trying to figure out the right sound, because I was originally just trying to like make J5 style beats,
Uh-huh.
and he eventually came back to me. He's like, no, he's like, do your own thing. He's like, the reason I reached out is because like I like what you're doing, and like, keep doing that. And so I thought that was kind of cool, and like definitely
Yeah.
gave me confidence for that sound.
That's cool. Yeah, because he's probably like, we've got the J5 thing going on our end. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I love what
We
you're
don't need
doing. I
help with
want,
that.
yeah, but it's like, but I would have done the same exact thing as you. Like, oh, he wants to work with
Yeah,
me. I'm gonna do like try to make what he's already doing to
totally.
get involved. But the fact that he was like, no, I love what you're doing now. And then did you put an album out with him?
We did, yeah. So it was definitely a bit of an experiment. Like, I don't know if we fully, found the right sound blend.
Uh-huh.
But it was such a fun project, and like he's just like the nicest, most humble um, uh, guy that I've met in this industry. And so it was really nice. He kind of took me under his wing and taught me about the industry, and even just like learning how to collaborate with other people. It was such a good experience.
Wow, wow. And when do you put out were you, uh, going by Vandelux at that time or no?
I was, yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So this would have been, I think, 6, maybe 5 years ago. So this was kind of like, that was really the first project I had put together, and then, but I didn't really have like a solo project yet.
Yeah,
So after that, started, you know, focusing on originals, and kind of building, I guess, the project into what it is today.
okay. And you had a massive I mean, you put out your first I'm like on as far as Spotify goes, like, I mean, you had that, the big song that you did was like you had like a viral TikTok, right? With one of your songs off of your, the EP in 2021?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Like we so I linked up with Third Brain, which is an indie label in LA.
Mhm.
And it was the first time, labels kind of get you thinking about marketing and how you're going to market your song, and put a timeline behind you to actually release something and get it out. And so that was all helpful. um, and there's one song from that EP called Matter of Time, that was the last, I think it was the last single of the EP that we released, and had a lot of traction out of the gate. And it's funny, it's like it's never the song you think is gonna pop off that actually does, like
Mhm.
the song was kind of an afterthought. Um, and it was maybe like 2 or 3 months after it got released. There's a guy named Steve Cardigan who did like a video about it, and it was a review where he was kind of just talking about the song and had an animation to it. And yeah, like the power of TikTok, it took off, and so that definitely helped to get some exposure to the song, and get on playlists and stuff like that.
That's awesome. That must have been massive. Did you know that he did that prior to, or was it like you logged onto the app and you this guy had done this thing?
Yeah, it was, so I didn't know about it. I think it was the label that was like, "Hey, like, check out this video. You should go comment on it." And so I was like, "Oh, like, cool video, thanks." And then just it just like took a life of its own. But yeah, it just goes to show like how TikTok and Instagram and that's changing the game,
Mhm.
for better and for worse. There's a lot of negatives about social media stuff as well, but
Yeah,
um,
100%.
yeah.
Well, was Stimulus the first like original, like just you solo song that you put out?
I think it was, yeah. Stimulus was the first one. That and I put that together in Luxembourg. I kind of did too. So I put together Stimulus and this other song called Shelter that were similar, almost like trip hop, like lower tempo tracks. And um, Stimulus got a bit of love kind of out of the gates. Shelter ended up getting picked up by a show on AMC and getting used as like the theme song of this song. There's a show called Dietland, which is a strange name, but it was kind of like it was sort of like Fight Club type show, but all women, and it was super interesting concept. But yeah, they ended up using it as his theme song on AMC, and so that helped to
Whoa, Dietland? What's it called?
Dietland.
And they
Yeah,
would
diet.
fight? Like women fighting each other?
So
Or they'd
it was
fight for fitness? Like okay, sorry, I'm just like guessing now.
it was like I'm trying to remember the premise of the show. So it was uh I'd have to go back and look, but it was basically like about women who were getting sort of like body shamed, fat shamed, and like start this underground group to kind of lash back at that and to counter that. And so it was kind of like a revenge type show, but I think it lasted one season and then got axed, which was the end of my theme song career, but it was still a good
But you had
experience.
a
So
theme song career. That's killer, right? I mean, to have your
yeah,
song in it, was that cool seeing it for the first time, like on TV?
yeah, it was super cool. And in my head, I'm like, man, I hope this is like the next Seinfeld, and then it gets cut. I was like,
Sure.
oh man.
The next Friends, like that band that just can't think of their name off the top of my head. But they
Mm,
yeah, they had that one song and just never probably had to work again.
yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, that wasn't me, but maybe a future theme song. We'll see.
Yeah, you'll land another one coming up. And then you did out in 2019, Lost in Common came out, and you had another. I mean, No Some is another big song of yours.
Yeah, so there was actually an EP before 2021. Sorry, yeah, Lost in Common was before 20 was it 2020? I think I can't remember.
I think it
I'm
was
looking now.
2019.
2019, yeah,
Yeah.
and then Dream State came out in 2021. But yeah, Lost in Common was I was kind of in a dark place. Was in a not so great relationship at the time, and I think a lot of the music sort of reflected that.
Hmm.
But looking back on it, I'm super proud of the music that came out of that, and I think it represents that time period in my life pretty well. Um, and then yeah, and then Dream State was sort of a COVID project and coming out of COVID. Um, uh, so slightly different vibe, and then
Is that
since
when Matter of
then,
Time hit? Kind of like, or it had to have been after, right? Because there was the EP out.
yeah. So the single, I think Matter of Time came out maybe a month before the EP, and then
Okay.
or no, maybe I think it maybe came out at the same time as the EP. I can't remember, but
Hmm.
part of that whole package. And then yeah, since then I've just kind of been focused on prepping for live tour stuff and tidying up this my first kind of single debut album, which is coming out later this year.
That's awesome. And have you put like as far as now the most recent one you have is All I've Ever Known? Is that going to be a part of the new album?
Yeah, that's part of the new album.
Okay.
And then there's another single coming out on the 20th next month, which is the next single of that album. So the album's
Wow.
kind of all over the place, but I'm super excited about it and excited to release it and yeah.
Have you done a lot of shows? I mean, was that something that you were doing pretty actively before the pandemic?
I was not. So I think as an electronic musician, you need to kind of choose a lane. You need to figure out if you're going to go like the DJ set route
Hmm.
and really push that, or if you want to try to perform your songs live as best you can. And I think like, I love I love both. I love going to shows that are like Rufus, for example, where it's electronic music, but they've
Yeah,
got
but
like
they're
live
live
drums, they're
bands.
singing, they're
Yeah.
doing, yeah. Um, and it's very tempting as an electronic musician to go the DJ route just because like you show up with a USB stick, you plug it in, and you create a
Yeah.
vibe and you bounce, right? It's so easy, it's so efficient. But there's something I think it's like higher risk, higher reward to go the live performance route.
Mhm.
And I think because on most of the songs, I'm doing the vocals, I'm doing instrumentation. Um, it's a challenge that makes sense. And um, so I'm in the thick of it now because like you also end up it's different like when you're a band, you rehearse all the time. You're always playing live, right? You get together with your bandmates and you go through different songs and as an electronic musician, you spend a lot of time just like piecemeal putting songs together. So like recording little snippets, sound design, moving things around. And so when it comes to performing them live, you almost have to like reverse engineer it and peel it back and say like, okay, well, what did I do for these chords again? And how do I create this effect? Um, and it's a process and it's challenging, but um, yeah, this is going to be the first kind of headlining tour that I'll be doing starting in May. So we'll see. Hopefully it works out, but I'm excited and nervous about it. So
Yeah. Is there a particular song that you're gonna do, or that was the really difficult that to strip back, but you knew like, okay, I have to do this song, but how am I gonna approach putting it into a set, like creating a live setting for this particular song?
honestly, it's like every song with vocals
Okay.
because I'm not like a natural singer. I started adding vocals to my tracks because they needed a melody, and I didn't know that many people in the industry, and that could come in and lay down vocals. And so it was sort of an afterthought. And then when you start performing live, you're like, okay, now I'm going to be in front of 500 people, and I've got to, I've got to do this, and I've got to project, and I've got to hit the notes. And so um, I think all the songs with vocals, it takes 90% of my energy just to focus on that, focus on hitting the notes.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like navigating, like there's no way to play every sound live, and so you're playing with like a backing track with instruments that are punched out so that you can play those live over top, and then you have ways to modulate the sound and add effects and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, to answer your question, I think anything with vocals is is challenging and what I'm focusing on most now.
Okay, cool. And with the album, you said it's kind of all over the place as far as what sonically. So like all I've ever known might not sound much like maybe a few other songs, like I guess other songs on the album.
Yeah, I mean, so like the next single that's coming out is a collaboration with a friend of mine in LA, Tyler Mann,
Hmm.
and it's like a very different direction. It's it's almost more like 90s hip hop style beat. Tyler's doing vocals on it. Um, and it's just like yeah, it's a very different feel. And so there's different themes, right? So there's other songs that sound like all I've ever known, and um but there's also stuff that's not like that at all. So I think one of the challenges I found with my music is like I don't have a super consistent genre, and so it's sometimes difficult to put together a project like an album because it's tough to get a bunch of songs that are kind of cohesive and sound good together. And I think
Hmm.
I've done that with this album, but yeah, we'll see.
Was it difficult to like? I would imagine like putting, because not a whole lot of people are doing albums, which I really admire that you're doing like a whole album, right? Instead of doing like, okay, here's a single and then I'm gonna do a single. But to do a whole album, was it difficult? Like putting the set list of the album together, did that take a while? Like trying to figure out, okay, I want to do start with this, and like because like you just said, you kind of have to tell like it's not a story or a concept, but like it has to be cohesive and it has to flow together if you were to play it front to back. Was that like a journey in itself?
Totally, yeah, and I think that's the most daunting part of putting together an album is, and it's tough to know what comes first, right? It's like, do you, in your mind, before you start the album, do you have this storyline and then you create songs to fit in?
Hmm.
Or do you just express your feelings, your emotions, and you create music and then piece it together afterwards? And the approach I took was definitely the latter.
Hmm.
um, and but it actually, and in terms of like curate, I mean, okay, it's still somewhat in progress figuring out where songs are going to go, but
Hmm.
it fit kind of thematically and story wise actually better than I thought it would. Um, but it's, yeah, it's a daunting, especially now. Like people, people listen to music like they use tissues. It's like you listen to 20 seconds of a song, then you throw it out and you grab another one, and so I think the art of releasing an album is somewhat lost, but it's just one of those things you kind of, I think you just have to do, even if it's just like a personal accomplishment, or for the people like yourself who kind of appreciate that full album, that full story, and they're going to listen to it front to back. Because just releasing singles all the time, I don't know, it feels a bit not complete, So
And this is gonna be your first full album too, right?
yeah,
Is that must be exciting in itself, like to go from doing some EPs to now you're gonna have your first like full project, full album out.
yeah, no, super exciting, and it also helps shape the live show because you have this full body of work that you can kind of tell that story and have that narrative for live shows as well.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for doing this today.
of course, yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I have one more question before I let you go. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah, I would say so. Okay, I'll try to keep this short, but I would say that
Mhm.
the industry's changed a lot over the last 5, 10 years, and when I was first thinking about music, um, labels kind of controlled everything. Like they were the gatekeepers, and if you wanted to get a spot on the radio, you had to go through a label. And I think that dynamic is shifting very quickly. It's a lot easier for new artists to get discovered outside of labels, TikTok, social media, algorithms on Spotify, etc. um, and it's flipped a bit where I think labels now are chasing to get in front of artists that are already making it on their own.
Mhm.
And so, I would say, I'm fortunate that I found a label that is a good fit, but it took a while to get there. But I would say, like take your time and figure out what makes the most sense for you. And don't be afraid to go it alone because there's the tools and avenues out there to make it happen these days.